Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm so excited to bring you a recommendation video for haunted house stories. For those of you that follow my channel at all, you are probably very aware of the fact that I don't normally like this oh so popular subgenre, but apparently I enjoy enough stories to film a recommendation video because this is not actually the first video but the second that I've done on the topic. So if you want even more recommendations, go check out the video playlist that's going to be linked in the cards and description box. Otherwise, today I have even more recommendations for you all, and you will find, because of the fact that I don't normally love traditional haunted house stories, all these books in one way or another are slightly different, a little bit more out of the box and unconventional, and for those reasons I was able to love them. So whether you are someone who loves the subgenre or are like me and are kind of tired of the classic haunted house story, hopefully you'll find something here to enjoy. All that being said, let's get started. First, let's start with The Apartment Graveyard, which is a story translated from Japanese where the story takes place. It follows a young family that is moving into a new apartment building that seems too good to be true. The place is brand new and the price is just right. It seems like the perfect place to have a young family start out. However, little do they know that this apartment building has been built on top of a sacred graveyard, which is not very lucky, and so the place is possibly haunted. Now, I've really enjoyed this book for a couple of different reasons. One being the fact that it has this diverse Japanese perspective. Japan is always a country that has fascinated me. It has a really distinct culture that is oh so different from my own as a Canadian. And so I loved those elements being brought into the story. They talked about different cultural practices, different traditions, things that are not the same as they would be here. And so I loved that aspect of the story. And then I also thought that the story itself fit really well with the haunting because of the fact that in Japan there's a really large part of the population that does believe in spirits and ghosts, and so having the haunted house setup just really fit well with that idea, and so the story was just really well set up for me. It's still a haunted house story, and I will be honest that I didn't totally love those elements of it, but if you enjoy a haunted house story, I think you will enjoy the finale and climax a little more than I did because it goes to some very tropey places and I just don't love those. But I enjoyed the setup to the story quite a bit. I enjoyed the character development, the setting, all of that. So if you're interested, definitely a great one to check out. Next, we have The House on Abigail Lane by Keelan Patrick Burke, and this is a horror novella that follows a home that is supposedly haunted. The story, or rather the account, supposedly takes place over the course of many years. The house was built many years ago, and there have just been a lot of strange incidents, disappearances, strange sounds, and things that just the neighbors were never able to explain. And so I like this story because while it is definitely fiction, the author is not pretending that it is real. It's written as if it was nonfiction. And because of the framing of the narrative in that way, it just made the story so much more compelling and perhaps a little bit scarier for me because it seemed like it was actually a true account. And I was able to get more pulled into the story because of that. Again, it's very short because it's a novella, so I was able to get in and get out maybe without getting too tired of the haunted house tropes. I will say this one is perhaps a little bit more traditional than some of the other ones on the list, but for whatever reason, it worked pretty well for me and I do recommend it. Next up, sticking with novellas, I want to talk about Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khaw, and this is another novella. In this one, we follow a group of young people that are getting together for pre-wedding celebrations, so not the wedding itself, but the parties beforehand. The man is quite rich, so he decides to celebrate his wedding by renting this beautiful Japanese mansion for his bride-to-be because she is fascinated by these kinds of places, and so they go out here to party. Little do they know that supposedly there is a bride that was murdered here and is now seeking revenge. The story follows this group of friends who have a very complicated past. Different ones have dated each other, they don't all like each other, and friends is probably a pretty loose term, I'll be honest. They don't exactly come across as really close buddies. Instead, the story really follows them as things start to go terribly wrong, and then the whole group falls apart and terrible things ensue. So if you are someone who likes survival horror, which I do, I think that this one works really well because yes, it's framed around a haunted mansion, but really at the heart of the story, this is about a group of friends that have a horrible breakdown and terrible things that fall out from the fact that they are not truly friends, and you get to see what transpires. So obviously I'm trying to keep it all really vague because it's so short, you want to experience it for yourself, but I like this one quite a bit. And again, it has that Japanese influence that I really like, talking about spirits and different traditions that I really enjoyed. And yeah, just a lot of fun. The characters are very unlikable, but that is done on purpose. So if you enjoy watching people just fall apart and have their relationships break up horribly, this is one that you might want to check out for yourself. And now I want to talk about The Ghost Line by Andrew Neil Gray and J.S. Harbison. And this is actually a sci-fi horror book or a haunted house story set in space. So yes, it's a little bit of space horror, and I love to talk about this book in as many recommendation videos as possible. So when I realized that this technically fit the topic, I was eager to put it in. If you don't know from my previous videos, this is a story about a group of salvagers that go onto this old, beautiful space liner that has just been floating through space. They go there to get parts. However, when they get on the ship, things are just not quite right. They almost feel as if there's a presence on board or something that is possibly haunting the ship. Now, I will say that this book is probably first and foremost science fiction, so compared to the other books on this list, I would say it's a lot less scary, and it's really not meant to be horrifying, but it takes the tropes of a haunted house story and puts them in space, which I really liked. I should also mention that this book is written by a married couple, and the main salvagers in this story are married as well, and so I personally liked the representation of a happy and healthy relationship, something that I often do not see in my books because I tend to read books about marriages gone horribly wrong. But this one was just really refreshing. I love the character work, and I just found it to be very atmospheric and creepy and just well paced, and for me it was just the right length because again, this is novella. So if you are interested in that one, highly recommend it. I feel like it's so underhyped despite the fact that I keep recommending it over and over again. From there, I want to talk about Horror Store by Grady Hendrix. And this, if you don't know, is set in a store that seems to be IKEA, but it's definitely not for, I'm sure, legal reasons, but the store definitely seems like an IKEA store. It is this furniture store that is from a Scandinavian country. And within the story, we follow these underappreciated employees that are forced to work a night shift because within the store, strange things are happening. When they get there in the morning, it seems like things are out of place and it almost looks like someone is terrorizing the place at night. So they are sent to investigate what is happening, and when they stay overnight, well, terrible things ensue. This is a story that I like to recommend to anyone, of course, who loves IKEA, but also those of you that have ever had those terrible jobs working in retail, where you again are underappreciated, underpaid, and have to deal with terrible customers. This book is just a great nod to, again, particularly IKEA, and as you can hopefully see from this book I'm holding up, the story is written as if it was an IKEA catalog. So it's absolutely creative. You have diagrams of the different chairs and objects throughout the store, and the furniture itself plays a major role in the story. It's one that gets weirder and weirder as it goes on. I don't want to spoil too much, but it's very, very unique, which again is why I liked it. I did not totally love the story altogether. I'll admit it's not a 5-star read for me, but I appreciate it a lot. And again, for someone who does not like haunted house stories, this was a great one to pick up because it is just so different than anything else you'll read. You just have to experience it. Again, even if you don't end up loving it, you still are going to want to read it. You want to get a physical copy if you can, so you can have that IKEA experience. And I thought this story was just, yeah, really fun, and just one that you just want to talk about afterwards. So obviously recommended here. Then I just briefly want to mention a couple of graphic novels for those of you that are open to having a story told through pictures as well as words. The first one I want to talk about is Infidel, and this follows a young Muslim woman who is moving into an apartment building with her boyfriend. They are moving there to live with his family. However, because of her faith, she is discriminated against within the apartment building, and on top of that, the apartment building itself may or may not be haunted. probably haunted because it's in this list, but I'm going to leave it there. This is a book that I really liked for a few reasons. Of course, the Islamic representation was fantastic. I really thought it was an interesting conversation and getting to see the social commentary all around the prejudice that does still to this day really exist around the religion. I thought that was fantastic. But on the flip side, I do want to say that this is also one of the scariest graphic novels that I have read. I thought that the haunting, the way it is done, the artwork, everything worked so well together and really fit into a cohesive story. So again, the representation did not feel shoehorned in, but really enhanced the story and tied everything together. So if you were at all open to a story like this, highly recommend it. I thought it was so fun and so poignant at the same time. So definitely one you want to check out for yourself if you have not already. And the other graphic novel I want to mention is Lock and Key by Joe Hill, which is probably one a lot of you have already read, but just in case, I want to briefly mention it follows a family that move into an old mansion where they discover keys that have magical abilities. And I think I like this story so much as a haunted house story because you could argue that it's not really a haunted house story. The house instead is almost more magical and the horror really comes from what transpires. So it's a little bit of a reach, but again, I think that's why I liked it so much because it was so unconventional. It was not tropey at all, and I really liked the character development in this one. The children especially were amazing. I loved Bo, he was so cute, and the artwork was fantastic and bold and dark and gruesome, and I do like that it is a cohesive story that is told in 6 volumes and you really get to experience it all. It's not one of those stories that's just never ending and just kind of needs to have a stopping point. Walking Dead, I'm looking at you. But this is one that I really do love, and if you for some reason have not picked it up, I highly encourage you to do so. Even if you're not normally a graphic novel fan, this is one that you might want to check out even as an exception. And finally, I want to end this video by recommending one that you probably already know about, but just in case you have not read it, I want to talk about The Shining by Stephen King. This is the story of a family with an alcoholic father who is in remission. He is trying to do better by his family, and he ends up accepting a job going to work at this hotel in this very isolated place. And in the middle of winter, so they are going to be cut off, they agree to go and do this. And when they go, well, the place is possibly haunted and terrible things ensue. I have said many times on my channel that I am honestly not a huge Stephen King fan. I appreciate his work, but I don't always love it. And I will admit this is not a 5-star read for me, but I have reread it since my first time reading it, and I do appreciate it more upon the second go through. And I do think it works really well as a haunted house story, or at least worked pretty well for me. A few things that I love about the story is the character work, the family, and specifically Jack struggling with his demons and really fighting against that, and then the psychological toll that the hotel takes on him. I do think that was really well done, and I do like when haunted house stories are more psychological like that. I do like when they go in that direction. And then of course my favorite thing about the story is his young son Danny, who has the shining or this supernatural ability to be able to hear people's thoughts. And while it is less related to the haunted house story itself, I just thought it was really fascinating and just a really creative, imaginative piece to the story. And honestly, I just found Danny to be a very likable character. So I will admit that my favorite things about this story were not necessarily, again, the hotel, but I like what it is trying to do, and I really did appreciate it. So while again, it's not an all-star favorite for me, I do think that if you are trying to read more haunted house stories, this is one that you really should give a try if you haven't already. And even if you have read it, it's definitely one that is worth rereading because I did get more out of it the second time through. So that is it for this video here. I'd love to hear of the books I talked about, which ones are you planning on checking out for yourself? As well, I would love to hear what is your favorite haunted house story, as well as recommending me haunted house stories that you feel are a little bit more unconventional or out of the box, because those are the type that normally, as you can tell, work best for me. If you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. I do read a lot of horror as well as thrillers, science fiction, and fantasy. You can help me out by giving this video a thumbs up, sharing it around online, dropping a comment, even if it's just a little emoji of a house. And if you hit that little notification bell, you'll never miss another video from me. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.